Voices from the Vault is brought to you by the Shelter Island Historical Society. This story was researched, written, and read for you by Mariah Moore. At the beginning of the American Revolution, the British forces formed a blockade to prevent goods from being imported to the rebelling colonists, and salt in particular became incredibly scarce. In a time before refrigerators and freezers, fresh meat was more of a rarity. Without the freedom to just pop a pork loin into the freezer chest, the most common method of preservation was to salt most of any fresh meat obtained and hang it in a dry place. A family could purchase a large portion of beef when their neighbors slaughtered a cow, and use the meat for months, cooking the cured meat in stews along with vegetables and a starch like corn or potatoes. Without salt, people couldn't ensure they had meat to eat except right after a fresh slaughter or hunt, and much of the animal would go to waste. And they couldn't preserve the vegetables they grew or bought, like cucumbers and peppers, through the common practice of pickling to eat through the cold season. Salt was a necessity to make it through a New England winter, not just a flavoring aid. Additionally, the human body requires sodium to function. It's not common for modern Americans to have a salt deficiency given the high amount of salt in most of our diets, but this was not the case in the late 1700s. Salt was mostly imported to Long Island from England, following the mining and processing procedure. So when British ships prevented the arrival of cargo vessels carrying that precious salt, the fledgling country was in trouble. Luckily for Shelter Island, we had Crank the Salt Man. Very little is known about Crank, mostly that he was a man of color, and was listed as a free head of household in 1790, and while Shelter Island was on and off occupied by redcoats, he strained and boiled seawater from the bay and sold the resulting sea salt to the people of the island. We also know that he had a daughter, by a nurse named Flora, and centuries later that daughter's name emblazons dozens of road signs here on Shelter Island. But we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. The child in question was named Diana, and she was born into slavery, owned like her mother by a family who lived in Orient, probably the Terrys in the Terry Mulford house. We don't know when she was born, but it was likely during or just before the American Revolution. And by the time she was 25 years old, she had purchased her freedom. According to one person who knew her, Diana was able to buy herself from those who called themselves her masters by hard work and careful frugality. But given that many enslaved people worked hard and behaved frugally, but were never able to buy their own freedom, Diana's circumstances must have been more complex than just determination and thriftiness. We know also that she was married to a man named William, and had taken his name as her freed surname, making her Diana Williams. Not only did she buy herself from her enslaving family, she also eventually bought a parcel of land on the northern tip of Shelter Island and made her home there. She established roots, joining the local Presbyterian Church and the Columbian Temperance Society, a local teetotaler group that dominated Shelter Island decades before the countrywide alcohol prohibition. She was known to be a genteel woman, frugal and kind, and she took care of at least one local elderly and ill person, as evidenced by a surviving pay receipt. Any caregiver, in any time period, knows that such work requires incredible patience, gentleness, and strength, all traits we can attribute to Diana without a doubt. According to local lore, Diana had the habit of sitting on a flat rock just off the shore of her property to clean freshly caught fish before they were eaten, and waving to passing boaters that knew her. Thereby, the rock on which she sat came to be known as Dinah's Rock, Dinah being a common adulteration of Diana. Following her death in 1837, the property changed hands a couple times, but in 1873 the land was bought by Eben Horsford, and was transformed into a pleasure area with a long pier for steamboats to dock and deposit their passengers borne from New York and Boston, and a carousel for visitors to ride. The area retained the name Dinah's Rock, and was popular among islanders and tourists alike for a decade until it closed down in the early 1890s. Though the little amusement area was replaced by private homes, the streets in the neighborhood still reflect its history. Names like Carousel Lane and Dinah Rock Road. So little information remains about this deeply fascinating Black woman who made Shelter Island her home at the beginning of the 19th century. But the information we have paints a picture of a remarkable woman. Shelter Island has no shortage of remarkable women in its history. Women like Cornelia Horsford, daughter of the Eben Horsford who bought Diana's land. Cornelia was the Shelter Island Library's first president, an archaeologist and author, a renowned gardener, and Sylvester Manor's second-to-last lady of the manor. But that's a story for another day.